To me, the capacity that video games have to build a relationship with the player is what makes video games such a valuable art form. Like, you can watch movies and you can listen to music, but games demand a more direct involvement. You have to play the game. We see games that are so enthralling for people that sometimes players completely forget their reality outside of the game. Games can invite players to keep playing and to play forever. Obviously, I'm showing gameplay of Monster Hunter for this video, it's my main example, but this can apply to many other games. The player has the potential to use the immersive aspect of a game world to create their own story and consequently suspend their own disbelief, even when the game itself doesn't have a scripted narrative. Or if that scripted narrative the game does have has already finished, but the game itself allows the player to keep playing even though they've already finished the story. Many players prefer games with strong narratives. These players follow the game's set path and complete the game's challenges just to see the story unfold and see the characters undergo their developments. And even for me, for many of my favorite games, the narrative is all I'm there for. I'm only playing it to see the story. Monster Hunter is different. Why do I play Monster Hunter for countless hours if I'm not necessarily playing it for the story when I normally play games for the story? Now, the easy answer is that, well, the game is fun, or the challenges are fun. And yeah, the game is fun, but I honestly do not believe that this answer applies holistically to me, if I can put it in those words. I certainly don't play Monster Hunter for the challenge. I've never played Monster Hunter for the challenge. So I'd like to dig deeper and explore the ludic, immersive nature of Monster Hunter, and maybe try to find a reason why I've immersed myself with this game world to such a degree. I only have a limited understanding of ludology, and that's like apparently the science of game studies, that's understanding games and the act of playing them and like the cultures that have been built around video games. Well, games themselves, but by extension, video games. In these studies, I see that there have been ongoing debates on whether narratives in games have an influence on the ludic experience for the player and vice versa, as well as whether or not narratology should be separated completely from ludology in the analysis of games. I bet that was a bit complicated. Look, the analysis of video games have actually gotten quite technical and complicated over the years. Now again, I have never formally studied ludology, but I did, however, formally study visual narrative because I studied film. It was an art form that I did enjoy producing, and I wanted to understand the science behind the suspension of disbelief and just the art of cinema. Here's the thing though. Growing up, I was never a film buff, nor was I an avid television watcher, and I'm still not. Rather, I played video games. I grew up with the mythologies of Nintendo, Konami, Sega, From Software, and of course Capcom. Those narratives were the inspiration for my narratives. I'm going to try and explain this as simple as possible in my own understanding. What are games? Well, games are an experience where the player, that's us, are put in a situation where we must succeed over a challenge. What is a narrative? Well, a narrative is just a scripted story. But the experience of the player succeeding over the challenge could also be considered a story, right? Because your personal experience could be retold as a story in retrospect after you've beaten the game. So of course, games are able to tell their own fixed narrative stories. We all remember the stories from our favorite video games. But if the player is playing the game and that player has an influence on the visuals being displayed at any given time, then the player should be the one telling the story. It's the player's story, not whoever wrote the game, right? But if the game prevents the player from interacting with the game during, say, a cutscene that involves story, then is that cutscene really a game? Or is that cutscene just a movie that's being played in between two instances of game? Can a game truly be a game if the player cannot interact with the game, or is that stop being a game? Can a narrative truly be a narrative if the audience can manipulate the outcomes of events? At that point, what is it then? Are cutscenes just a reward for the player, or are they actually part of the game? This is the stuff that people have been arguing about for a long time, and I don't exactly have the answers on a lot of these, and a lot of this is just kind of who cares? But I think diving deep into this is what helped me find the answer as to why I play Monster Hunter. If we look at other games for a second, like competitive games, those are almost always completely ludic experiences because there's no narrative to be had in a competitive game, aside from whether or not the player has won or the player has lost, or the team won or the team lost. And you'll find that those games have the most play hours by their community. MMOs are right behind. The video game MMORPG was born from, of course, video game RPGs, and those RPGs were born from tabletop RPGs. And it's obvious that player interaction affecting the narrative was present from the beginning, because in the beginning, the players were actually creating the narrative themselves. That's the draw to tabletop RPG. The narrative was only a narrative after the players stopped playing and they shared their tales of that time they played D&D. When I was a child, when I played video games, I would often role play outside of the scripted narrative. I would take the characters and just do whatever I wanted because the game allowed me to. Even if it wasn't actually presenting the dialogue on screen, I could make my own dialogue. But the thing is, ultimately, no matter what I did, the story still ended the same way the developers, the author, built it to end. It always ends with credits and then the game is over. And that always made me sad. I didn't want to restart the story. I wanted the character I was playing to continue. I needed to see what happens next. I became entangled with the character I was playing and they became me as I became them. If I'm still alive, then I don't believe the story is over yet. I never played any MMORPGs growing up because in my eyes they resembled traditional RPGs too much. Even though I didn't really understand that unlike traditional RPGs, MMORPGs are different. They're actually more in line with tabletop role-playing. You have a bit more freedom and control over what you're doing. Then I played Monster Hunter for the first time. I've told this before, my first Monster Hunter game was Monster Hunter Tri, Monster Hunter 3. So I played the game, I beat Cedius, and I saw the credits of the game. And I expected the game to be over, but it wasn't over. It kept going. I didn't fully comprehend that what I was playing was, in a lot of ways, even if a lot of people disagree, it's an MMORPG in disguise as an action hack and slash game. I kept playing, and I went online, and I connected with friends, and I kept playing and playing and playing, and I ended up getting a PSP and playing Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and all my friends got Freedom Unite as well, and we all started playing, and I just never stopped. It became my favorite video game franchise. And I think the reason why I never stopped is because the game never told me to stop. There was no point where it said the game was over. It kept encouraging me to keep going. After every challenge, the game provided me with the gratification of success through the music, the material rewards, the systems to upgrade equipment, and unlocking countless new objectives to replace the ones I completed. It felt like it never ended. On top of that, nothing felt arbitrary. Everything I did felt earned. Every step I took was my own, every item I collected was mine, every weapon swing was my decision, and every hit I took was my own mistake. None of this was gated by some kind of cutscene or level cap system. There was no arbitrary level that I had to reach in order to defeat certain enemies. It was mostly based on my personal skill. I had to level up my own reaction time. I had to level up my own understanding of these combat systems. They had always been more important than even my stats. The monsters never had, nonsense invulnerability frames, and I was allowed to capitalize or cheese the monsters any way the game allowed me to. And Monster Hunter never ridiculed or insulted me for doing whatever I wanted. I could fail a quest over and over, and it would never say game over. Instead, my hunter returned to all the smiling faces at the village, and they kept encouraging me to keep going. And again, the best part about this game is that it never ended. Even after you beat every single monster, or you complete every single quest, or you build every single armor set and weapon, the game will still provide you with some other objective to pursue. And these objectives weren't to fulfill a scripted narrative or to unlock some secret final cutscene. You don't play Monster Hunter to save the princess or prevent an apocalypse. All your objectives were your objectives that you chose to pursue yourself. It was up to me and my choice when to retire from the game, but I didn't. I never did. There are many players that argue that the aesthetics of Monster Hunter, and by extension the world design, are irrelevant to the core gameplay loop, and if the developers were to take Monster Hunter and boil it down to nondescript challenging boss fights in arenas with preset loadouts, some players would still enjoy the game, and I don't doubt that. If the objectives presented to the player, the trials they had to accomplish in Monster Hunter, lacked any of Monster Hunter's aesthetic or world design, then I'm sure some players would still find fulfillment in completing them because the gameplay and the combat is still fun, and they could still potentially generate their own personal narrative in their personal journey through the nondescript challenges. It's also hard to really define or illustrate or provide an example of what a nondescript version of Monster Hunter is. And I think that's because, honestly, I doubt the game would have the player base it has if it wasn't for everything else the game provides. Truthfully, there are other factors at play in Monster Hunter that makes this game world attractive to players. I believe what makes Monster Hunter so ludic is how it characterizes itself. I've heard it argued that the world design is essentially a character. It's so interesting to learn about the game world that it strongly invites players to continue playing. I've made 2 videos on Monster Hunter's narrative and also its core theme. I highly recommend watching them after this one for further elaboration on my thoughts on those topics if you're interested, but to summarize, I argue that Monster Hunter does not necessarily need a narrative with a conclusive end, because the game's actual narrative is the personal journey the player undergoes, and its conclusive end is when the player stops playing. And I argued that the theme of hunting monsters was actually a reflection on humanity's presence on Earth, that the world of Monster Hunter is a reflection of our own real world, and illustrates how humanity must learn to exercise their will in balance of nature, not at odds with it. I should clarify that this video should not be used as ammo to argue that Monster Hunter shouldn't have a narrative, or that a narrative potentially harms the ludic experience of Monster Hunter. I believe the narratives in Monster Hunter are actually complementary to the player's choices and the objectives they choose to pursue. Monster Hunter fans know that the game doesn't end when the credits roll. For many, that only marks the beginning. I believe that Monster Hunter is beautiful in its potential to deliver a profound message to the player. Despite the player having control over their own narrative, they have control over what they're doing in the game. The game doesn't tell you to go in any which direction, it's up to the player. You have control over how powerful of a hunter you become, and I believe that this is the reason why Monster Hunter is such a powerful foothold on so many players, because of this relationship between the player and the game world. Monster Hunter has an often argued, grounded setting. It is inspired by our real world, and some of the animals honestly could be mistaken for real-world animals. The technology presented within resembles that of older Earth technology. The sound direction invokes a diegetic experience, ambient sounds and music that sound like they're actually from or playing in the game world. All of this is an effort to make the player believe that this place could theoretically be real, or at the very least be complementary to our real-world mythologies, that maybe long ago humanity once faced a monstrous threat that they do in this game. The gameplay loop is constantly rewarding the player and encouraging the player to repeat that loop. The game continually provides the player more options and objectives they can pursue. The game offers an online community of other players with their own objectives, simulating a massive functioning work environment. The players are expected to learn a large number of jargon terms and gameplay mechanics in order to be successful, and are often apprenticed by more experienced players. Instead of any sort of arbitrary level up system, the player grows in understanding, and so does their skill in accomplishing the task of hunting monsters. This builds a sense of personal pride. In the Monster Hunter world, every worker, every monster hunter, is upheld as a culturally significant member of society. The work the player conducts is necessary for humanity's continued survival in this game world. There's an immense feeling of purpose given to every player, every monster hunter. Even if they're part of an industrial machine, they are still branded unquestionably a hero to society, and you are always rewarded for it. This phenomenon is not entirely unique to Monster Hunter. I'm sure that many other MMOs have a similar grip on people, and the players have invested a good amount of their life into the game, essentially living a second life there. And I know some people call that sad, but I think having a momentary escape from reality is okay, and sometimes healthy for a mental state. Monster Hunter is that for a lot of people. I've never really been good at video games, honestly. I'm not good at video games. I'm not even really good at Monster Hunter. I have issues with reaction time. I overthink everything instead of making, a concise decision, and thus I struggle putting my thoughts into words, and that's why my videos are so long-winded and all over the place. I have a lot of self-doubt because of how my brain works. The community often tells me that Monster Hunter is not as deep as I'm making it out to be. Actually, the community has said some many hurtful things to me, and it's made me doubt that I'm good at what I do. I think we've all experienced something like this in our lives. And despite whatever Monster Hunter is really about or what it holds in value, I know in truth that I feel happy when I play it. Monster Hunter is a second home to me, and it's a cozy place. Even if I'm not very good at a lot of things, I know that in the world of Monster Hunter, I'm at least good at something that matters to the people there. I'm not the best Monster Hunter, but I am a Monster Hunter, and it's a good feeling. It keeps me going. I've taken so much time to unpack and understand the culture of the people in this world, the jargon, the techniques, as well as the preferences, the music, the food, the clothing, the courtesies. I've teamed up with countless other people in the world of Monster Hunter, and we've completed our common goals together. I've made friendships in the world of Monster Hunter and enemies. I have a sense of pride in the cities of Dondorma or Lochlac, Tanzia, Mindgard, and I wear it on my sleeve. And like every other hunter in these towns, I desire fame in the land of the beasts. I'm a working citizen of a country that doesn't exist.